Good morning. Welcome to Hometown Heroes. This is Rick Irving with my co-host Mary Staffel, and today we have Army Airborne Ranger Michael Johnson with us, and he's got a remarkable story of kind of growing up with some issues, and then going in the Army, making a career of the Army, and then after he got out of the Army, put his leadership and entrepreneur skills in action, built a big company, sold it, and then started doing some other stuff. So, Michael, here comes the 301st.
I say they were up early this morning. I think they were out before 8 o'clock, so they're pretty active today. You may see Rick and I muting a few different times because the jets are just so active.
That's good.
Yeah, we love it. Sound of freedom.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So, Michael, welcome to Hometown Heroes. And you were born in Oklahoma and lived in Arkansas for a while.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Rick and Mary. And thank you for having me on here. I kind of feel inferior in a way because it says heroes, and I definitely not sure that I fall into any of that type of category, but I do appreciate it. Born in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Moved to Siloam Springs, Arkansas when I was 6. When we were in Oklahoma, my dad, from what I understand, was a RV repairman and then a milkman and then going to college. And so we moved to Siloam Springs because he wanted to go to the University of Arkansas to major in industrial engineering. During that time frame, though, because he was working and going to school, I can't even tell you of any time with my father from 0 to 6, right? So we moved to Siloam Springs, Arkansas. At 7, mom and dad divorced. Again, mom was working, dad was working back and forth, and I lived with dad for a while, lived with mom for a while. You know how that story goes. And from there, when I was 9, mother had met a truck driver, and dad had a girlfriend. And so even though I had a place to stay and we did have some communication, there really wasn't a real strong relationship. Have no brothers and sisters. Grandparents died when I was young. My mother was actually born and then adopted by a family and then disowned by that family. So there really wasn't any aunts or uncles. So there was really no one around, no family members really close. So when I was 9, she met this truck driver, started hanging out with him, and I was staying with her at that time, but I never saw her because she was always gone. When I was 10, I was walking back and forth to school, but I found a Huffy bike in the trash. The guy that lived 2 doors down from us was a kind of a handyman, always fixing stuff. So I pushed the bike home, and I took it down to him, and I asked him if he could fix it up for me. I don't know if mom ever paid him for it. I didn't pay him for it, or if he just did it out of the kindness of his heart, but he got the Huffy bicycle good to go. And probably about 2 weeks later, I found a lawnmower in the trash, took it to him. He did a tune-up kit on it, and the lawnmower worked. So I started pulling that lawnmower behind my bicycle and mowing grass. So when I was 10, I had about 10 customers, and I always had a little bit of cash, you know, because I tried to save it, but I was mowing the grass. And mother decided to take off with the truck driver on the truck, so she sent me back to dad's house. Well, dad, again, he's working and has a girlfriend, so it was a place to stay, and that lasted for about 10 months. And then when I was 11, I came home from school one day, and he had moved out.
Oh my.
And the house was empty, you know. So I sat on the porch that night. Of course, I had my trusty bicycle and my lawnmower. I sat on the porch that night and just kind of bewildered on what's really going on here. And of course, there's no one to call. Next day I went to school, came home. The next day he was still gone. So at that point I figured I was homeless, and I was. So for the next year, I lived in there's an old baptismal downtown that had a little cave thing. And this little cave, you could go in about 30 feet, and no one ever went in there, but you go in about 30 feet and you look back up over the top, and there's a shelf, a rock shelf that is 30 by 30 and probably about 10 feet tall. And it was not cold. It was not hot. It was not wet. I did not ever see a varmint or a bug the whole time I stayed there. But I stayed in that's where I was for a year. And so I would still go to school, and I always had sports first period, so I volunteered to wash the towels so I could wash my clothes. And of course I could always take a shower after sports. I continued to mow the grass to have a little bit of cash. Kind of started me in church there because the Baptist church always had fried chicken and mashed potatoes before their choir practice on Wednesdays and Sundays. So I always made it a point to be there for that. The girls, I got to know some girls at the theater. At that time, you could give food out. You didn't have to actually throw it all away. So they put the leftover popcorn in a bag, and I would pick it up out behind the theater, and that lasted for a while. Never forget her, a girl at Andy's restaurant. Her name was Denise Daniels. She would give me free hamburgers and stuff. So I had plenty to eat, but no one ever knew for that year that I was homeless. I didn't tell anyone. I always made sure that I was bedded down after everybody was gone, and I always made sure that I was up before anybody showed up. So there was no question. Anyway, so I did that for a year. After about a year, the school wanted a parental consent for a band trip. I was in band, and I signed it myself. They figured out that my signature really didn't look like a mother's signature, I guess. And so they asked me about it, and that started the questions and answers on what happened. There wasn't a big CPS investigation or anything. It's just the way it was. So I started living with kids at school and continued that way until I graduated. I did reconnect with mom and dad later on. They're both dead now, but there wasn't a relationship in the beginning, and there certainly wasn't a relationship with them later on. I mean, I don't hate them, because it just happened, but it is what it is. I tried to never use that as a crutch either. I mean, that's just the way it was, and you just suck it up and drive on,
That's a lot of responsibility for a kid.
I was saying, and a lot of resiliency on your part. You learned how to figure things out in an awful big hurry and take care of yourself. And yeah, I'm sure that affected a lot of relationships after that. So it's just, one of those things. But man, oh man.
It's kind of crazy.
It is.
So after you graduated, then you went into the service?
Yep. Graduated, went in the Army, basic and advanced training as an artilleryman. I went to Schofield Barracks, Hawaii. Well, first of all, let me back up. What got me to the Army, I rode my bicycle from Siloam Springs to Fayetteville, Arkansas. It's 26 miles on my bicycle to the recruiting station because I saw something on TV somewhere, and I think it was a rifle squad, honor guard, something that kind of caught my attention. It was Marine Corps. And so I rode my bike to the mall. At that time they had 4 recruiting stations sitting right next to each other. And I went to the Marine Corps door, and it was locked. Of course, Army recruiter's right next door. He's like, "Hey,
come over here.
You want to meet interesting people and travel to exotic places and all that kind of stuff?" Like, yeah. So he showed me all the films about Airborne Ranger and artillery and infantry, and I'm like, man, that's cool. So he's the recruiter at the Northwest Arkansas Mall was the one that turned me on to the Army because I had initially gone to the mall to knock on the Marine Corps door, but they were closed. So, but anyway, listed, left for training in May of 84. After completing basic and AIT, went to Schofield Barracks, Hawaii, 82nd Field Artillery, 25th Infantry Division. I was there for about 5 months, and the infantry division was converting to a light infantry. So they wanted volunteers to go to Ranger school to get Ranger qualified. So I went through the RIP program in Hawaii and then went back to Benning actually, I went to the Infantry AIT, and I went to Airborne School, and I went to Ranger School, and then I went back to Hawaii. So I finished out my time in Hawaii. Of course, you're on the island for 2 years, but we always deployed somewhere for some type of training to the Philippines and Korea and Thailand, New Zealand, Australia. And it was always a good thing about the island is that, you could be on the island and have fun in Hawaii, but there's only so much of that fun that's fun, I mean, once you've done it all, it's done. But luckily, we would spend 30 days going here and going there and for different types of training exercises. So I actually spent about 13 months off the island doing training somewhere else. Yep.
And so that was kind of your start of going different places in the world.
Yes, sir. After Hawaii, I went to Korea, spent probably 6 months on the DMZ with the QRF type stuff. After I left Korea, went back to Fort Bliss, actually. And they sent me to the 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment. And I was a special weapons team chief for the artillery piece. It's 155 millimeter 109 howitzer there. I spent several months trying to figure out exactly if I wanted to stay or not. So in the meantime, when I came back from Hawaii, I'd gone back to Siloam Springs, and this girl that I knew in school was going to Texas Christian University. Now that's my wife now, but at the time, this girl was going to TCU, and she wanted a ride from Siloam Springs back down to Fort Worth. So I figured, well, hey, I'm going. I went to pick up a car, so if I could drop her off at TCU, then I can drive on out to El Paso. So I did. So dropped her off, but when I dropped her off, her dorm mate right across the hallway was named Dawn. She was going to TCU. Her dad was a preacher, originally from Colombia, and they had a Spanish church down in South Texas, and she was pretty hot, and I thought she was pretty nice looking. But, I had to get Fort Bliss, so we just, hey, how you doing, whatever. I went to Fort Bliss. So about 2 months later, the friend that I had taken down there had notified me that she wanted to maybe talk a little bit, maybe date. But I'm talking Fort Bliss to Fort Worth is just a few miles. You can't just hop over there after work. So that turned into a year-long, long-distance drive back and forth. And after that year, I was like, I'm eligible to re-enlist, so I'm going to re-enlist and go to Fort Hood because I can get a little bit closer to Fort Worth. So I did re-enlist. Sent me to Fort Hood, and then she decided to not go back to TCU and go to Texas State Technical Institute down the valley, which is where her dad had his Spanish church. So it was still, 6 hours, 7 hours away. So we did that for a year. After I left Hood, we got married in March of '89. And in May of '89, I came down on orders to Germany. So I packed up, went to Germany to the 2nd Armored Cav Regiment. It took her from May until October to get to the Germany. Once I got her there, 2nd ACR, that was a unit that did border patrol along the Czech and West German border before the Berlin Wall came down. So I spent most of my time on the border doing border patrols, trying to do what they've done since World War II, because the American Army was the only one, the German Army couldn't even go within kilometers of their own border. It was always the U.S. Army. And so we spent that time there. And then in '90, I deployed from Germany to Saudi Arabia and then Iraq for Desert Storm, and then came back to Germany after that 6 months was over with. And the unit I went back to, 2nd Armored Cav Regiment, deactivated. And they're like, hey, you need to find a home. Well, the Army found me a home in Recruiting Command and sent me to Jackson, Mississippi, to be a recruiter.
Now look at those pictures. Where was this, Michael?
Okay, sorry, I had lost volume there. That was in the Philippines. So there's a triple canopy jungle. I mean, it looks like on the right side, the little hooch there laying down. That was where I stayed for 30 days. But on the left, in the top left up there with the boonie hat, that's a triple canopy jungle. And it was a place called Fort McSai. And we were training basically with their special ops rangers, that kind of stuff, just doing different things. That jungle was decently dense that you couldn't even walk straight, especially if you had gear on. You had to maneuver back and forth because I can't even imagine fighting in that kind of stuff, because you cannot walk a straight line without getting sidewinded or sidetracked by a bush or something. Down the bottom right corner is after the training was over with, we had about 2 or 3 days of R&R, and they assigned one of their soldiers to be our sponsor. So we actually went to their house and they fed us and that kind of stuff. And this girl, her name is Liberty Mangla Puez, and her daddy was the one that was our sponsor, or my sponsor. And so they fed us pig on the rotisserie and rice out of the bamboo, and it turned out to be a pretty good deployment, but that was the Philippines. Miles gear and little camo. I think that was at Grafenwehr, matter of fact, in Germany. Yeah, Colonel Marcy, this battalion commander, we dressed up for something. I think that was a annual ball of some kind. I can't even remember where that was.
Look at you all dressed up, spinning and everything.
Yeah.
Right.
You were young then.
Yeah.
We were all young once.
Yeah.
You must have been some kind of an awards banquet where you were recognized.
It was something. I think this is a recruiting command annual training conference, and so the two cropped it out, but the CSM and the battalion commander are to my left and to my right. That's my little wife.
The one that you moved around the country for.
Yeah. She's I'm 59 and we've been married 36 years, be 37 in March.
Wow, very cool.
Had a little 6 months or so at the Pentagon, and that was a picture I took in front of the Capitol way back when. Yep, showing off to the Iraqi kids. They always like muscles. So. Oh, that's go ahead, sir.
Is that a mandolin?
It is.
Okay.
It is. So there's I have a lot of friends that are musicians that primarily are with the Bill Gaither group of folks. Bill Gaither, has been an icon in Christian music for a long time, and he has some folks that are personal friends of ours, the Isaacs and the Martins, the Nealons, Collingsworth family, Mark Lowry, David Phelps. So all those folks, we've gotten to know over 20 years and have decent friendship relationships with them. So when they're in town, we're always helping out, trying to help them set up and help them tear down, take them to lunch and that kind of stuff. And so that's Sonia Isaac's mandolin.
Oh, okay. Do you play?
I don't play.
Okay. It looks like you.
I just
you do.
I was going to say, there's our entertainment for next December.
Yeah, we can get you on stage at roll call.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't sing, can't play. I just like to be around it.
So, in your career in the Army, you got a lot of leadership skills that helped you later on, didn't you?
Yeah, sure did. It seems like, I always taught the soldiers, and just to backtrack a little bit, it seemed like Sergeant Johnson always got the soldier that no one else wanted, the kid that no one else could keep track of. And I always believed by that lead by example, and they would send somebody to my section or platoon company, as I increased in rank. And it was like, if anybody can fix them, it can always be Sergeant Johnson. and so I led them with example. I mean, I wouldn't ask them to do anything that I wouldn't do. I would always show them how to do it first, and train them and spend time with them and let them know that somebody does care, and even though I had a kind of a crappy childhood and no one cared about me, I certainly wasn't going to take that out on anybody else or use that as an excuse. And so some of those soldiers that, somebody else couldn't deal with because of attitude or whatever, and nothing against my fellow NCO, but some of them, they just didn't know how to lead. They were just there, and they kind of frustrated me too, because I'm like, okay, Sarge, you need to get with the program. But those soldiers would come to my section or whatever, and there's a couple of them that fell through the cracks, and that was after training and evaluating and retraining and showing them all that stuff. If they decided to walk, then that's on them. I did everything I could to save them. But a lot of them I did save, and I like that because of leadership, because it took a soldier that was probably fixing to get kicked out or do something that's going to get them an Article 15 or court-martialed or whatever, and just spend a little bit of time with them and show them how important it is that you do what you do. And if you pick something up, you put it back where you found it. And if we do this over and over and over again the same way every time, when the bullets do fly, it's going to save lives. Because if you want to go off and do your own thing, people will die, And so I took all those skills, and after I retired, I spent 21 years in the Army. I retired in 2004, and I live in Grandview.
And you were a first sergeant. So in the Army, the way that it was always explained to me, because I would say, yeah, I'm a first sergeant in the Air Force, and they'd go, oh, so they would think that I was in the same unit that it was that what you call an MOS, we call an AFSC. And I said, no, I'm in, I can be in any unit anywhere, because in the Army, you have two different roles a first sergeant plays, right? One is like the Air Force, where you're the kind of like outside the chain of command, like you are the enlisted people's representative to the commander, and the commander's representative to the enlisted. And the other side is where they would call, when I was in pre-deployment training at Fort Bliss, I would hear the Army guys call me top, because that was the top of that career field. So what it never is really clear to people that are not. So like the Navy doesn't have a first sergeant, and everybody's first sergeant's a little bit different. So explain to folks what that means when you say I was a first sergeant.
Yeah. So typically in the Army with the first sergeant, if you're in an infantry squad or if you're in an artillery battery, you're as an E5, you're typically a gunner in a gun section. And then as an E6 staff sergeant, you take over that gun section. So now you're the chief of section. So you're in charge of that. And then you make E7, and then you move out of that section, and now you're the platoon sergeant or the gunnery sergeant over 4 sections of gun chiefs. So then in that battery, you may have, 2 or 3. Well, most of the time it's 2 platoons. Sometimes you have 3 or 4 or 5. And each of those platoons has a E7 sergeant first class. And then you have the first sergeant. And the first sergeant is the senior NCO in that battery. So he's the senior NCO over those platoon sergeants. And there are some what they call transit, or you have some first sergeants that do go from unit to unit, but typically in the Army, the first sergeant is and has been that MOS or a close MOS to the folks that he is or she is leading. And so, you wouldn't typically have an admin first sergeant come to an artillery battery because they have no clue about what's going on in the artillery unit. But there have been times where I've seen artillery first sergeants go to be first sergeants for a supply company or a maintenance company in that role. So
yeah, and dealing with personnel issues. So the way that I always equated that is that we are kind of in the Air Force, we're the kind of like the personnel person. So we're outside the chain of command so that, we don't need to know what their job is. We just need to know how to guide them. Kind of like what you were talking about, you do with these folks that they sent you. I told them all the time, sometimes I'm here to give you a hug when you need it. And sometimes I'm here to kick you in the rear end when you need that. Because sometimes they need that, right? But the role, so it was always so confusing to the different branches and to other folks when you say you're first sergeant, because I wasn't in the first sergeant in any unit that I actually did the job that I did before I was a first sergeant in. I was always in a different unit, is the outside the chain of command, just doing the work that needed to get done, taking care of the discipline, the morale, the welfare, all of those pieces of the puzzle that are so important to help our folks be able to perform on the job. Because what you found in dealing with the young people they sent you was that other people had just kind of washed their hands of them and said they're hopeless. Well, they're not hopeless. They just need somebody to guide them back onto the path, make sure they understand, here's the rules, don't get off the path. And we can all go on harmoniously, and you can stick around. But that's always been a point of contention. So for anybody that might be out there listening, there is a difference in the roles that in branches and what the first sergeant actually does. So it's not apples to apples all the time. Right.
And for us, as an Army first sergeant, yes, you're in charge of, the discipline and the morale and taking care of the whatever needs to be taken care of at the administrative level with the company commander. However, growing up as an artilleryman or growing up as an infantryman, if I need to go down there and show you how to declinate an aiming circle, if I need to show you how to employ a Claymore mine, or if I need to show you how to break down an M16 in 2 minutes or whatever, I can still do that.
Right.
And it's a good in that way, because you're like, well, man, if Top can do that, then why can't I? And sometimes it takes, going down there and say, listen, man, I'm not just telling you to do it because I want to. I'm telling you to do it because I've been there. I know how to do it. And it's going to save your life if you do it the right way. So there's not and sometimes, you get those company commanders, those captains, and no disrespect to them, but sometimes, man, they're kind of knuckleheads sometimes.
All right. Yes, they are.
I've been doing this for 18 years and I understand. And oh yeah, I did go to college too, sir. I do have a college degree, and I earned it in the Army. I didn't earn it before like you, but I'm not a dummy. Give me a chance to show you what we could do. You don't have to just change stuff, but
some of the most highly educated people we had in some of my units were enlisted people. Like we actually had legitimately in the aircraft maintenance squadron, we had one guy that worked for NASA. He was a reservist, worked for NASA. He was a literal rocket scientist, and he was in like an E6 or an E7. I mean, that was not unusual.
So you really couldn't use that term. It's not rocket science to him.
Right. We couldn't use that with him. That's right.
But both in the Air Force and the Army, the first sergeants, you have to have a lot of leadership qualities. And that's one thing that Michael and I were talking about earlier before the show, is the training that the military gives as far as leadership goes. And I think it's some great training. And then it carries over into retirement or after you get out of the service, and it helps you later on. But being around Mary, she's got some good leadership skills. I mean, she can get out there and
I'm good at herding cats.
give orders good.
Yeah.
So,
But on the leadership, after I retired, so I lived in Grandview. I have 40 acres down there, and after I retired, I really didn't know which direction I was going to go. I was just going to take some time and then figure out what I wanted to do. But I noticed that my trash guys, the guys that were picking up my trash, would always either drop something on the ground, or they'd crunch the truck right in front of my driveway and leave all that ooey gooey stuff right there. And I know it's a public road at the end of my driveway. My house sits like 1,000 feet off the main road, but still, it's coming out of my driveway, and you got all that ooey juice out there. And sometimes the trash cans would be down in the ditch. And I'm thinking to myself, how hard is it to dump the trash, not spill it, and put the trash can back? And so I washed it for 3 or 4 months. This was so I retired in 2004. This was April. You get a little bit of transition time. So I left the boots in April. And in November, did a little market analysis. I asked some people at the cafe, hey, listen, what trash company do you use? And do you like it? And most of them were fed up with the price, how much it cost. And then some people would say, well, they don't pick up on Christmas. They don't pick up on New Year's, those kind of things. But the bottom line is a lot of them were dissatisfied with the service. My trash can's over here, my trash can's over there. So I just took all that. And from the recruiting command, it helped me out with market analysis and with, demographics and doing all that stuff to figure out exactly how to put a business plan together for a trash company. And so it took 3 months to put it together. In January of 2005, we actually started the trash company back in November of 2004, but 2005 was the first pickup. And what I did is I took a zip code down there in Grandview and Itasca, and I sent out little feeler cards and said, hey, if you could get trash service for this amount of money for 3 months, would you switch? And we had like 50 responses within just a couple of weeks. And by the end of the next month, we had 100 responses. And so I had a pickup truck and I had a 16-foot dump trailer that we put sides on and had a little door. And so we organized the route and actually started that company January of 2005. And we started picking up. I was telling Rick earlier that the first pickup day, we had 100 people. And I didn't have Google GPS back then, but I did have a little MapsCo type electronic mapping system. And so I put all the addresses in there. I'm thinking, man, this is going to be easy, because all the addresses are organized. But you got two factors down there. Sometimes people have numbers on their mailboxes. Sometimes they don't because it's in the country. And that Maps program was messed up because we get halfway or get down a road and it would dead end and you couldn't go through. So I've got the truck and the trailer. So now I'm having to back up 1.5 miles so I could turn around and go around and come in from the other side. So we worked through that, but it took us 24 hours to pick up 100 people that first pickup in January of 2005. It got a little easier after that. So we started organizing the routes. I had landfills that were within 10 miles of me. 10 miles south, I had landfill. 10 miles north, I had landfill. And so logistically, I'm thinking, if I send the trucks out first and then work their way back, then they can work toward the landfills. Number one, it saves, as the trucks get heavier, I'm using less fuel because I'm closer to the landfill. So I tried to use that, I guess, methodology. So the landfills were close. 6 months, we had 500 people on the route, and I got my first truck. And that made it a little bit easier because the trailer, you couldn't crunch anything. You just had to chuck it in there, go to the landfill, and throw it out. And so with the truck and the automation, it helped out. By that time, I had another crew member with me to help throw the trash. And we grew from there. And basically, for the next 11 years, it went from 0 customers to 10,000 customers.
Wow.
And I had 4 cities, and I had roll-off accounts, the big roll-off construction boxes. I had 51 of those contracted accounts, front-load truck accounts, and it just grew. I was telling Rick too that I spent about $2,500 initially on advertising and trying to get stuff organized. But after that, I would donate, cups or stuff to the athletic teams just to support the local volleyball team or whatever. And it'd have our logo on it. But as far as, trying to do a direct mail or any kind of marketing like that, we didn't, because everything grew by referrals. I was also telling him earlier that whenever we'd pick up a trash can, first of all, the trucks were always clean. The guys were in uniform. They had reflective gear on. And when they dumped the trash can, everything went in the truck, and they put the trash can back with the lid on it. And I would have people calling us and cussing us out when they first signed up, saying, hey, you didn't pick up our trash and yada, 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 yada. I mean, just go off. And I'm like, I was actually on the truck that day. So if you go back and check the trash can, I promise you it's gone. And they go back and look at the trash can and it's empty. They were just surprised that we were actually putting the trash cans back where we found them. And so that kind of became our staple customer service, and it spread like wildfire, and it went off from there. So I had it for 11 years. I had a guy that came in and wanted to buy me out. I did not broker any type of sale, didn't ask for that sale. He said he was in the trash company or trash business previously, and he had been following us for like 4 years, because I guess he had a statement of no compete, so he could not get back in the business any sooner than that. But he said he would pick a truck and he would follow that truck and just watch them operate. And then the next day he'd pick another truck, and so, we're running, 7 trucks 5 days a week, plus the roll-off truck and the front-load truck. And he said he was just impressed because everybody put the trash back. They didn't, make a mess on the road. And he said he was just impressed with that aspect of it. And so he wanted to buy it because he said that's a well-organized company. And he said that's something I would want. So he made an offer, and he had the checkbook, and it sold.
It was an offer you couldn't refuse.
That's right.
So that was a good deal. You started that from zero, built it up, and sold it, and now you're kind of known not as a trash guy, but as a funeral guy.
Yeah.
How'd you get into that?
Oh man, that's weird. So after we sold in 2016, I had, like I say, I've got the acres down there, so I was just taking a little bit of time off. Because the trash business it's a capital intensive business, and it is hard work. Those trucks are no joke. Anybody that's ran 18 wheelers and that kind of stuff, it is not nice. And so I was just tired, and I said, well, I'm just going to mow my grass and weed eat and take care of it. At that time we had 4 horses, and just take care of the place and kind of chill out for a while. And someone at the cafe, R&K Cafe in Grandview, their father had passed away, and they asked me, he was a veteran, they asked me to go to the funeral home with them, thinking since I was retired that I knew everything about funerals, veteran funerals. So I went with them. This guy had a prearrangement already done, paid for, and he was so articulate in everything that he had written down in his little guidebook pallbearers that he wanted, alternate pallbearers in case they were not available, songs, alternate songs in case they weren't available. I mean, he had everything in order. And so when I was sitting there with the family, I mean, of course, I didn't know anything about funerals at all, but it went smooth. I mean, they were in there and out in like 30 minutes. They came up with times and dates for the visitation and for the funeral. And, the funeral director is taking care of all the military honors with DFW National. And it was nice. I mean, everything was good. So fast forward 6 months, I had another family, same cafe. Their uncle passed away. He was a Vietnam vet, and they wanted me to go with them. So I went with them to the funeral home, and that was a totally different story. That guy, he did not have a pre-need, and it turned into chaos. The family got so mad at each other about what somebody wanted to do that they had to go outside and settle their differences and then come back in and talk like grown folks. And I just took that. I'm thinking, man, that's two different scenarios, trying to get to the same goal. But the first guy had everything in order, and the second family didn't. I'm thinking, how good would it be if everyone had stuff in order, collectively as a family to just save all the heartache and headache and essentially money too. So I got with the funeral home owner, and I said, hey, these are the two scenarios. How do people do their pre-arrangements? And he said, well, you have to have a license, and this is how it works. So I went and studied, got my license, and I went back to him and asked him if I could, sell their pre-arrangements. So I did. Started selling pre-arrangements. And I noticed when I was talking with families at the particular funeral home that there's still a lot of veteran families that I would speak with that had no clue about the benefits that a veteran can get going to the national cemetery or a state cemetery. On the other side, there was also veteran families that thought that a funeral, just because they're a vet, that all the funeral is paid for, which is totally false. There's kind of a, once you get to the gate at the VA cemetery, once you get inside the gate, everything's free, but you got to get to the gate. And whether it's a cremation or a traditional casket burial, I just kind of took a personal mission on that. And I said, if there's that many families just in this local area around Cleveland, Johnson County that do not know about the benefits at the National Cemetery, or they think it's free, then how many of the 400,000 people around DFW are like that? And so I visited 35 different funeral homes, 27 cemeteries, 15 crematories across the Metroplex. And I pulled up, I got their price list. They have what's called a GPO. It's a general price list. You don't have to buy anything to get one. By law, they have to give it to you if you ask for it. So I got it. And I put all that stuff into a spreadsheet and did a little market analysis on where it's located and looked at also the prices and what the bare minimum would be and came up with averages. And those averages told me that it would be very beneficial if I could pass that information on to a vet. Because, like I said, if there's that many down where I was in the funeral home that had that issue, then how many more in the Metroplex? So it's kind of just a personal thing for me. I'm not on a VA payroll, and I'm not on a funeral home payroll. I'm just a retired first sergeant that will go to the kitchen table of a veteran family and spouse and tell them about the benefits of going to a national cemetery. I have the license, so I can write their business. And because I do not work for the funeral home and I do not work for the VA, then I'm not trying to sell them anything. You follow me? I'm not there for a commission. I'm not there for a paycheck. I'm on my own dime. I'm just a retired guy trying to help other vets. And so if they want to do their pre-need, I can, because I do have the license and they don't have the pressure from the sales of a funeral home. When someone does pass and they're sitting in the arrangement room, sometimes emotions can help drive the what they purchase. And funeral homes kind of capitalize on that too, because they know that everyone's emotional and everyone wants to do the best for their family, and that's right. I mean, that's good, but you can spend a lot of money sometimes needlessly when you don't need to. So anyway, so I took all that data and came up with averages across the Metroplex. Two types of funeral homes. You got sole proprietor funeral homes and you've got corporate funeral homes. There are a lot of sole proprietor funeral homes over the last 10 years that have sold to the corporate. Right. And it might be Johnson or Irving or whatever funeral home, and it may have been there for 40 or 50 years, and everybody and their brother have gone to that funeral home. But in the background now, they've sold to a corporate, and so they still may have a couple people that have worked there for 10 or 20 years. They still keep the same name to keep that continuity and the familiarity with the families. But in the background, their prices are going to reflect the corporate overhead. So some of the sole proprietors are still sole proprietors, and they could still get by with, they still have a profit margin, but they could still get by with doing a legitimate funeral and business for someone at a decent price instead of trying to, rake them across the coals. Anyway, I took all those averages, and the same thing with the cemeteries. When I took those averages on the cemeteries, there are corporate cemeteries, and there's cemeteries that are sole proprietor type stuff. And then you have graveyards, which graveyards are actually attached to a church. A cemetery is a standalone cemetery. Across the Metroplex, on average, if it's a corporate cemetery, it can cost around $8,000 for just the cemetery portion itself. If it's a sole proprietor or graveyard attached to a church, you still probably got about $4,000 that you have to spend, and that includes the open and close, the outer burial container, which most municipal cemeteries require, and it's called an outer burial container. Some people call it a vault. It could be a simple concrete box all the way up to an elaborate vault, and they run from about $1,200 to $8,000, depending on which level of vault that you want. Again, that is just something that most cemeteries require someone to have. So you've got the open and closed, you've got the vault, then you've got the perpetual care. All cemeteries have some type of fee that they charge for the grass mowers and the weed eaters. And then the headstone, that's a totally different deal. That can run from $500 to $8,000 or $10,000. And then you've got like I said, just the care of the cemetery. So at the National Cemetery, and I don't work for the cemetery, okay, and I don't work for the VA. I just know that $8,000 or $9,000 that a veteran and a spouse spend at a municipal cemetery, they can save that money by wanting to go to the National Cemetery. State cemeteries are around the state of Texas too, and they require the same criteria as the National Cemetery. You do not reserve a space here. You can fill out a form and send it to the VA that would let you get a little letter back that says you are eligible to be buried there. And really where that comes into play, if you've got a 214 that shows you spent 3 or 4 or 5, 10 years, 20 years retired, honorable discharge or general discharge, then you can have a place. And you don't really reserve the place or the spot, but you have to have that source document in order for the funeral director to make the arrangements with the National Cemetery. These things here that you see on screen now, the grave line, open and close, perpetual care, the flag, all that kind of stuff is provided at the National Cemetery free of charge for the veteran and the spouse, which, if you like I say, if you go on average in the Metroplex, those items are about $9,000 per person at a municipal cemetery. So that's a good savings, just by going to the National Cemetery for the veteran family. If someone wants to go to the state cemetery, lost you there. There we go. Someone who wants to go to the state cemetery, like I say, they have the same requirements as far as having the 214. They do have a little bit more leniency as far as the availability. For example, to go to the National Cemetery, you have to have 2 years of active duty or have completed the requirement for retirement with the Reserve or National Guard. The state cemetery, they require basically the same, but they do have some latitude to authorize someone to be buried there that may not have met the actual time requirements. It all depends on the space. National Cemetery now has gotten to where, now the one in Dallas is off of Mountain Creek Parkway. It's right off of Loop 12, next to the Dallas Baptist University. And it's kind of weird because when you go through that gate, it's like Dallas disappears. I mean,
right.
Anybody that's been there, it's almost like it does disappear. And of course, they have their flag at half staff. They have a kiosk up front where you can plug in information if your family does not know where you're located, or if you're looking for someone, you can plug in their name and it'll tell you what garden and what grave they're located. It prints out a little map that will give you directions to where that's located. They have ceremonies there. I mean, most of us in this area have been to some type of ceremony at the National Cemetery.
Yeah.
It's a I don't know. It's just a nice place, you know, and it's
very peaceful.
Very peaceful. They honor the veteran with the flag ceremony and the taps and the rifle volleys, and they offer both casket burial and cremation. So on the cremation, you know, they have columbariums, which are above ground. A veteran and spouse can both be buried in the same, what they call niche. If the husband if the spouse and the husband or wife are both veterans, they would like for you to go together, but technically each of you are authorized to space yourself. But again, you in these columbariums, you can get two folks in there, and they go in the spaces when a cremain comes back, it comes back in a plastic bag, in a hard plastic box, and in a cardboard box. It's like 9 by 6 by 6. And that's all you need to put it in there. You don't put it in an urn and then put it inside here. It makes no sense to do that because, number one, there's not enough room. Number two, you're wasting money on an urn if you're going to enclose it into the niche. So they also have in-ground for cremations. So when someone passes, the funeral directors at the National Cemetery will ask if they want to go in ground or above ground as far as the cremains. And so when all's said and done, the funeral director at the funeral home that you use will make all the arrangements with the National Cemetery. They'll make arrangements with the honor guard for the particular service. They'll make arrangements to do all that stuff at the National Cemetery. So when the family shows up, you know, they're going to be assigned a particular lane that they line up in. And from the entrance, everyone will be escorted to what's called a committal shelter. And the committal shelter is where they actually do the honors. You know, if it's a casket, they've got the flag folding and the military honors. Same thing with the cremains. The folded flag will be unfolded and then folded back in memorial. And then from that point, the family is released and the casket or the cremains are buried in their appropriate place. And the family is not allowed to go to the actual grave site during the funeral because sometimes, you know, they do 10 funerals there a day. And sometimes when they're burying new, you know, if it's a spouse that's going to join their other spouse that's already buried there, that's a different grave site. But if they're all new casket burials, they may dig a space for 8 or 10 caskets at one time. And so when they do that, those lawn crypts are opened up, and they really don't want the families hanging around while they're trying to bury 8 or 10 caskets safety-wise, and it's just kind of irreverent in some place. So once the casket goes to the graveside, then they will tell the family you can visit it at 1600 or 1630 that afternoon once the grave's been covered and they've got the temporary marker on there. Then, of course, you get the headstone. You can get about 25 different characters on the headstone. There's all kinds of religious symbols, but most of the time it's, you know, loving mother or loving dad or, you know, something. But you get 25 characters that you can put on that headstone.
So I have a question that I hear frequently, and you mentioned that, you know, if the spouse, so the veteran or the spouse, whichever one of them passes first, that they can both be buried at the cemetery. So they are able to do that where they save a space for the one that hasn't passed yet so that they're together? I'm assuming?
Yes.
So does that work the same way if both are veterans and both are eligible? Will they allow you to be, will they save a space so that you can be buried together?
Yeah. So at the National Cemetery, the casket burial is 2 stories. It's going to be double depth. And so whoever goes first will go first. And then whoever goes second will go second. That's going to use the same space. If they are both veterans, at the time of the second death, that's going to be something that the family would need to convey to the funeral director or somewhere in their paperwork stating, I want my own space, or I want to be with my spouse. So if they both are veterans and they both have 214s, then whoever goes second is eligible for their own particular space.
But they may be in a different place.
They may be in a different place. Yes, sir.
How do they do the headstones if they're together and they're both veterans?
Yeah. So they're going to have, on one side it's going to be one, and on the other side it's going to be the other. Yeah. And if they're both veterans and they're both buried in the same plot, whoever goes first is going to be on the front, and whoever goes second is going to be on the back. Typically, and they may be able to put on the back the same data, because like a spouse that is not a veteran gets a name, start and end date, and a little phrase. If they're both veterans, and on the back they're going to get the full inscription, just like the veteran on the front. Something else too that a lot of people ask about is, one wants to be cremated and one wants to go in the ground with a casket. If the cremated one goes first, then of course the family can elect to hang on to those cremains, put them on the shelf until the next one goes, and then just add those to the casket. Or if they don't want to do that, then those cremains can actually be put temporarily into a niche in the columbarium. And then when the second one passes, then the National Cemetery will pull those out and then add them to the one going in the casket. So, families can still do, cremation or casket burial, whichever one they want. So there's a lot more to it, but, the pre-need, all this leads up to getting a pre-need done. And I will tell you that pre-need locks in the price. I buried a friend 4 weeks ago that did a pre-need in 96. He paid $2,700. And his funeral today on paper would have been $22,000. So by doing the pre-need, it saves the family a lot of money and a lot of headache.
Amen.
There's a lot to it.
That is the truth.
It's not a simple thing. One of these slides you talk about 50 things that must be done on the most difficult day of your life, and then there's just a lot of stuff, and it helps whenever you have everything together.
Yeah.
And
when I come out to the house, I've got a full presentation that talks about all kinds of things that you have to do. And again, we're able to sit at the table and as the honest broker and be able to tell you exactly how and what it's going to take to get from where you are now to the gravesite. And it's hard to talk about sometimes, but planning and prior planning. We plan for weddings, and we plan for births, and we plan for parties and birthday and all that other stuff. And I think a funeral is something we have to plan too. There comes a point in your life where mortality is 100%.
Father time is still undefeated.
Yeah, and we've got to do something to help plan for that. And it's not getting any cheaper. Funeral suppliers, the chemicals, the caskets are going up by the minute. Most funeral homes are having at least 2 price increases every year. Some are having 3. Right now, a cremation, just a bare minimum cremation, and not to take anything away from like Neptune and some of those Dignity. about $3,000, $2,300 to $3,000 is about an average for a direct cremation. If you're looking at a full visitation, casket burial, the average right now is about $8,600, and that's just for the funeral aspect of it. That's not death certificates, and that's not honorarium for the clergy member, and that's not flowers. And again, if you're going to a municipal cemetery, now you've got another $8,000 or $9,000 to pay for the plot, the open and close, all that kind of stuff. So you can rack up a lot of money trying to get buried, So
yeah, and so in the last since early 2021, my father passed, and earlier this year, his girlfriend, his longtime girlfriend that he lived with, she passed, and then my aunt passed in May or that last day, April. And so all of them had everything prearranged. It was all done. It was nothing that, for my aunt, she was my godmother. So I did sit with her, and because she's the only one of the three that wanted, a Catholic service. And since I'm a Catholic, I sat with her, and we picked out her when she was, and near the end, we picked out her Psalms, and we picked out her readings and everything else. And, but they all went really, really smoothly. So I've told my husband, we haven't done this yet, and we need to do this so that our children don't have to go through any craziness, because it's all done already.
Yeah. And real quick, I do concentrate on the veteran and the spouse all over the Metroplex, but, I have a license to write funeral business for any funeral home. And so, like up around the JRB and Azle, Lake Worth area, if somebody wants to go to Biggers, I can actually do their pre-arrangement for Biggers. If someone's Midtown and want to go to Lucas or Thompson or Wade or Moore or wherever, it's not just limited. I concentrate on the veterans because I just saw a need there, and so many folks are misinformed about exactly what it takes to get a veteran to the National Cemetery. But if it's just anyone, that needs to get their funeral planned, I can do that for them. And like I say, because I don't actually work for the VA and I do not work for a particular funeral home, I can come to the table as an honest broker and explain it. And if they don't want to do the funeral, then I'm gone. I'm just there to provide education for them so that they can make an educated decision either now or later on about how that whole system works, because there's a lot to it.
Yep. I strongly suggest, if you have not, because now I need to get Michael to come out to my house. If you have not, you need to get this done. So if you're out there listening, you need to get this done. I know that one of our World War II veterans just did this with Sean Misko with Dignity, and he was, he's 98, 99 years old, and he's like waited all this time, and him and his wife did it, and he felt such a sense of relief that, he's talking to people about it and telling them to make sure that they do it. But please take care of this, because it really does make a difference in the worst day of your family's life.
Right.
Especially for the veterans trying to get in the National Cemetery, because I have people call me and say, my uncle just died. What do we do? Because we want to have him buried out there. So I'm going to start saying, call Michael.
Yeah, well, and that's why I tell them at the luncheons and try to remind them sometimes in the newsletter. Make sure your family knows where your DD-214 is.
Oh, yeah.
Make sure somebody has a copy of that, because without that, then there are ways to get it. And there are some ways to get it in a hurry if you have to, but it really puts an extra strain on the family you don't need. So make sure somebody knows where your DD-214 is.
And here's Michael's contact information, his phone number, and also his email address. So be sure and contact him, and he can kind of help guide you through all the hurdles that are out there.
Yep.
Right.
I don't. Again, I don't have a sponsor. I don't have a grant. I'm not on anyone's payroll. I'm just on my own dime and my own gas and my own card, going out and trying to educate families on how to get this done, or at least so they know and have the information so they can act whenever it comes time for them to want to act. So.
Amen.
Absolutely. Well, Michael, thank you very much for being on today, and it was a real treat to, I see you every month at roll call, and we talk sometime, but kind of to dig down deep in your story and find out that you had some trials early on in life, and I've got an 11-year-old grandson. I can't imagine what would happen if he was in that situation.
Right.
And then to go in the military and re-up so you could move closer to your girlfriend. And
God, it just goes to show God has a plan, right?
That's right.
Because everything worked together to get Michael with the people he's supposed to be with, and where he's supposed to be, and doing the work that he does. And he might not have gone in the Army had it not been for what happened before that, and then he wouldn't have had the incredible life that he's had since. So when you want to talk about a self-made man, that's Michael. Got
a whole list of things here that you talk about God. I mean, there's probably 9 or 10 times. I mean, bullets and AK-47 round through my flak vest. I could smell the nylon burning. I mean, there's all kinds of things that where God had a plan, and I really should have been dead probably 9 times, I think, that I counted, and for some reason I'm still here, and I don't know if this is it or not, but I'm still here, I guess.
Yep. Yeah. Obviously,
you have 9 more lives.
Yep. More work to do, my friend.
Oh, yeah. It's good.
But thank you so much for being on. And again, here's Michael's email address. So just reach out to him and get the information so your family can be at ease and not have a lot of problems whenever it comes time to work on burying you. So, or even if you just have questions, just like they call myself and Mary all the time, what do we do? Well, now we've got people to call. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your service.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And we will see you at roll call in a few weeks.
Yes, sir. See you.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Wow, what an interesting story.
Yeah, I would have never, ever guessed that he had that kind of an upbringing. He's really pretty incredible.
And you just don't know, people, their backstories, and think, man, how in the world did you make it?
Right.
They did.
Right. Absolutely. Whew.
We had a good roll call, and we've got another one coming up.
We did. Now we don't have to deal with parking hysteria at any more of them, I hope.
But it seemed like it worked out. I mean, as awful as it looked, it
did work out. It did.
I think we'd see a full house after seeing the parking lot, but they put them someplace.
Yeah, they did. They had them parked all over the place, and we're using golf carts to bring them to the door. So, in some ways, it was better for some of them. They didn't have to walk as far. But yeah, there were people parked everywhere, and it was a really good lunch. And the next one is coming up. The RSVP line is going to open up on Monday, the 13th. So even if you don't get an email, you can go to our website and you can RSVP right there. And the luncheon is the 26th, right? I got my dates right. October is the 24th.
Because the Sky Ball is the 25th. So.
That's right. Yep. 24th is the luncheon, and our couple of our wonderful friends from the Donut Dollies that we had here on the show. So, it's neat when we get to hear their stories here. And then, just last week, Bill Pugh was talking and he mentioned the Donut Dollies. And I was like, that is such a cool thing because we have this connection. And that's why I said it'd be interesting to see how the Vietnam vets and the Donut Dollies interact when we have them here. But Eileen and Joyce were two of the four that we had on, and they will be at the luncheon on the 24th.
Because whenever we think about the Vietnam War, we think about our servicemen and women going over to Vietnam, but we don't think always about people like the Donut Dollies, the Red Cross girls that went out. And I mean, they were in harm's way, just like our service people, or like our friend BJ Pryor.
Right.
It was a flight attendant. Well, back then she was a stewardess, but
right.
now they're flight attendants.
Right.
But, the airline was on contract to take those young men and women to Vietnam, and whenever they land, they'd bring home a group that had served there. So a lot of important people. Wear different kinds of uniforms than just our service uniforms.
That's right.
I know that a lot of those Vietnam guys are really going to enjoy hearing those stories and seeing the Donut Dollies. So, because whenever we had four of them on our show, because they were all together at a convention, and it was just a real treat to listen to their stories because they were just young girls over there in Vietnam.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. So it's going to be neat. I'm really looking forward to that. And, but before that, there are a few other things coming up, and I know, Rick, you're going to share some of them, but we do have the equines for the front lines. They tend to come out to our luncheons and set up, at least when we're at Willow Park. We haven't been able to do it yet at a luncheon at Birchman. We're still trying to figure out, where to put groups and everything else. But, they would always come out and set up a table and tell folks about the equine therapy, which is a really important thing, especially for those with PTSD. And they're going to have an open house and Heroes Hall dedication on Saturday, October 18th in Weatherford from 12 to 4. We sent out an email on it, and I can see if I can get Jeff to put it on our website. But it's, if they're interested and they're listening and they didn't catch it, they can always email us at info@rural-call.org. And I can email them there for information. They're also going to do a little raffle you can buy tickets for, and they'll have a gun and a quilt and, some other things that they're going to raffle off. But they're doing great work for the folks suffering from PTSD.
Absolutely. And they've been so dedicated to be at Roll Call.
Every month.
Month. We do have the Big Bash out in Baird, Texas, and this is going to be a full day of concerts, a lot of music, and the proceeds go to the Air Power Foundation. You can go to airpowerfoundation.org and find out more.
Free for veterans.
That's right.
If you're a veteran now, if you bring people with you that aren't veterans, it's going to cost them $25. $25 seems a small price to pay for 12 hours of musical entertainment. But if you're a veteran, any ID. So I talked with Cameron about that to make sure that it was right, not just an active duty or a retiree, but if you have a VA ID card or you have a driver's license that says veteran on it, those folks also will get in for free.
And then the Sky Ball is the 25th of October, Globe Life Park. You can find out more information airpowerfoundation.org for that. So a lot of things happening. Roll call's coming up, and the reservations go pretty quick. So
it went in 10 hours last month. So if you don't get in there on Monday, and you wait till Tuesday, you may or may not get in. If you wait much later in the week, chances are you're going to have to email us to get on the wait list, because that's how fast we give out 500 seats. And that, because that does include our volunteers, and we have we have a cadre of volunteers because we can't do it without them.
Absolutely.
But we can only fit so many people in the space.
Well, Mary, thank you for being here, and we thank Michael for being here, telling us more of his story and of the services that he can provide. So thank you, everybody that was part of this, and we will see you next week on Hometown Heroes.